Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us today for this month's housing market update with the one and only David Arbit. Just a few reminders, this is being recorded. It will be available on our website as well as sent out in an email to all the registrants for today. If you have questions throughout the webinar, feel free to use the Q&A function, or you can place them in the chat. We will try to get to as many as we can at the end of the webinar. Otherwise, we will be sure to follow up on any unanswered questions. And with that, I will hand it over to David.
Perfect. Thank you, Anne. Let's make sure I can do my screen share. Oh, I might need permission.
Okay, let me see here. Sorry about that.
Okay, looking good. Okay, guys, thank you so much, Anne. Anne is just doing a tremendous job. She is a wizard on some of the social media stuff and Google Analytics, so we're so grateful to have her. Thank you, Anne. Yeah, I'm really excited to be with you all as well. So thanks so much for joining us, for spending some time with us today. I think that's just fantastic. We know you guys are busy, and it really means a lot that you would take a little bit of time to invest in finding out exactly what's happening in this market of ours. So let's start trucking. Before we get going, we always like to thank our corporate sponsors. So we want to give a big shout out to Bell Bank Mortgage, also to our friends over at North Star MLS, easily the most forward-thinking and innovative MLS in the country, RCU, Royal Credit Union, and then Supra. So I want to make you guys a promise. My promise is that this is going to feel like drinking from a fire hose. This is going to feel like information overload. You can expect it. But the goal is, well, first of all, you guys are going to get slides so that you can, if you need to study this or you need to think through some of this content a little bit more, you guys will have the ability to do that. But, you know, there's just a whole lot of things going on, and we want to make sure that we cover all of it. So if it feels a little bit ambitious, that's why. So I always like to point out, because I'm always kind of shocked at how many people wonder, you know, how do I find some of these reports? Well, you go to our website. Ooh, let me get my laser going. You hop over to our website, mplsrealtors.com, and then you'll, well, two choices here. You can either click on market data, and it'll take you to our sort of market reporting environment. What I like to do is I actually just scroll down a little bit past the calendar, and I'll click, you know, one of the reports that you see here. And that'll take you into our, what we call our Fast Stats interface. So this is where you'll see all of our reports, the local market updates, the weekly report, monthly, our HSO, our foreclosure report, and then our annual report. And I'll just give you guys a little example. So I've clicked on monthly indicators, and what it'll pull up is, well, it'll pull up the whole report, but I'm just kind of teasing out one page from that report. So this is August, and you guys will know that we just got September numbers up Monday. We had our press release where we talked with the media about what's happening in the market, so that they can push that message out to consumers, home buyers, home sellers. So this is August. I'll just pause for 20 seconds here. Okay, so seller activity up about 1 1/3 for August. That's new listings. Looks like buyer activity up just under 20%, so that's pendings. Okay, so 1.3 and 19.7 for August. Look at September. Whoa, now we're 9.8 and 27.7. So we definitely saw some acceleration in market activity for both sellers and buyers. So, you know, just kind of right away, we can see, we can kind of see just how important it is to stay current with this stuff and to keep up with it, because as we see, you know, things can change in a month. Sort of like our weather here. It was a beautiful fall day, you know, only a few days ago, brisk, and now suddenly we've been violently thrown into a winter frenzy. I like it because I can't wait to go skiing. Anyway, so just one example, you guys, of how some of this stuff works. This is our monthly indicators report. It's our big flagship report, but it leaves something out. area, right? Location, geography. So the monthly indicators, this is just for the whole Twin Cities region. So across the entire Twin Cities region, 7,823 people listed their homes on the market, well, at least on the MLS, at least through North Star. However, 89 people listed their home in Calhoun Isle or uptown Minneapolis. So just know, you guys, that we have some reports that are pretty high level, that cover a pretty expansive territory. But this is where the magic happens, that in these reports that enable you guys to jump into different local markets, a variety of local markets, to see the local activity. So let's just do this pretty quickly. All Minneapolis communities, I see that seller activity is up. Sometimes it's only up 17%. Sometimes it's up over 100%. Over on the closed sales side, I see all all communities in Minneapolis are up. I guess Camden is flat. Looks like Central is down. So that's our downtown condo scene. We'll be talking more about that. And then looks like Phillips is down ever so slightly. But look, you guys, that's from 6 down to 5 sales, right? So it's 1 fewer, but it's 16% fewer because we're dealing with a small sample size. Looks to me like prices are rising throughout all communities in the city, with one exception, Phillips. And remember, that was from 5 sales. So perhaps those 5 sales could have been smaller units or 1 bedroom or studio or what have you. So days on market, looks like homes are selling more quickly in all communities, with the important exception of Central, so downtown. And then looks like University up slightly as well. So don't forget, you guys, University includes the Marcy Holmes neighborhood and some of the Nicollet Island East Bank neighborhoods, where you'll find Cobalt, Falls. What is it? Is it Phoenix? But I know there's a lot of other condo projects on that side of the river, and those would fall into University, even though some might think of them as downtown Central condos. Technically, they are not. And then lastly, let's just wrap this up. All the Minneapolis communities, I know this is top of mind for many of you. So interestingly, but perhaps not surprisingly, where we see sellers accepting a slightly lesser percent of their original list price is in Central, where sellers accepted offers at 96.2% of their original list price versus 97.7% last September. University as well, for the reasons we just discussed, down slightly. Inventory up in all communities except Southwest, where it was flat, and Camden, where it was actually still down. What's happening with absorption rates? Some up, some down. Looks like many up, several down. One big take, so I know we've been looking at the percent change a lot because it's important to measure the change, but let's also look at the level here, right? 6.8 months of supply downtown. That's a high level. It's up 90%. So that's a pretty high level. And technically, it's just barely into what some would call a buyer's market, because 5 to 6 months is balanced. Under 5 months is a seller's market. So notice every other market is still a seller's market, with the exception of Uptown, which is, I guess Uptown is technically balanced because it has between 5 and 6. But downtown, flirting with 7 months of supply, that has been a remarkable shift over the last year. So we'll keep talking about that, you guys. I also want to just throw in, I gave you guys a little bit of a data teaser, but now I want to talk about kind of how to use this stuff as we're thinking through what's happening in the market and what can the reports tell us. I want you guys to be thinking about, how do I leverage this stuff with buyers and sellers? How do I make my services more valuable? So I want to cover some of that right now. So do I need to become a numbers ninja or what? Well, not really, but you do need to know how to read a chart. Someone said recently, don't compare me to the almighty, compare me to the alternative. I kind of like that. So how will this benefit me? Well, how about at a listing presentation or an open or just a showing? I'm thinking about lead gen, lead capture, prospecting. Perhaps you're thinking about personal marketing. I always love this one, and I like to pause on this one. Think about it as you versus the market. So I'll just give you an example. The median days on market, cumulative days on market in Edina, let's say is 54 days. So just under 2 months, 54 days. Your median days on market for the, I guess it doesn't matter, the 1, 2, 3, 5, 20 sales you've had in Edina, I don't know, this month, last 3, 6, 12 months, your days on market is 42 versus, 54, or yours is 30 versus 60. So be thinking about that, guys, how to differentiate yourself, and use the stats to do that, because that's one very powerful application. The next one, I think, is another really big one, kind of managing expectations a little bit and making sure people are in tune with and in touch with the market realities, particularly in some of the changing markets that we just saw with uptown and downtown. We like to think about strategic and more informed decision making. I like to call it 3DM, data-driven decision making. So I encourage you all to think about that as well. And then just kind of, thinking about growth markets and forecasting, and as we're being more strategic about our business planning, are there segments that feel like growth segments? Seems like single family is kind of hot right now. Seems like new construction is pretty hot right now, given our inventory shortage. And then what about geographies? As some folks felt like they were priced out of South Minneapolis, Richfield became a really hot market, right? It's just that inner ring suburb, one suburb out, just across the crosstown there. Some think of Richfield as the greater South Minneapolis basin. Or St. Louis Park, as folks were moving out of uptown and some millennials were getting older and starting to have families and whatnot. St. Louis Park was one stop, close in. Well, back when I guess location mattered more, when people wanted to be close to work, but now we have a commute from our bedroom to our home office. Mine's about 12 feet, so quite a stressful commute. Traffic's usually light depending on when my wife leaves, though. So just thinking about this stuff more strategically, you guys, and using it to grow our business and to be the best agent you can be. Yay. So use stats to answer popular questions. You guys get these questions all the time. Is it a buyer's or a seller's market, right? We'll use month supply of inventory. I'll skip down. Are prices going up or down? Look at the median sales price. How long will it take me to sell my home? You got to check out days on market. How much of my asking price can I reasonably expect to receive? You got to take a look at percent of original, or if you've had a price adjustment, percent of current list price, and so on and so forth. Okay, friends, brace yourselves. Data analysis is coming, as we say. So let's hop in. Let's keep going on the market. Still 3 overarching trends as we see it, and as the data kind of shows us. I won't go into the details of all of them, but these are things that you guys know well. Buyer activity is, I'd even add, remarkably strong. I guess I'll dive into this one. August activity was the highest since 2003, likely since 2000, even though our North Star data only goes back to 2003, because they had a conversion back then where they couldn't document data prior. And then it was the highest overall level of any month of any year going back to June of 2004. And September was the highest September since 2003. So you guys can see, I mean, we're talking 16, 17, 18-year record highs. Quite remarkable. Now, it is worth noting some of the activity from, let's say, second quarter, so, April, May, June, even some of July, could have been postponed or delayed into, July, August, or September. So just understand that. Seller activity is still weak, even though we're seeing a gentle bump in September. We're still seeing, losses in terms of new listings compared to last year on a year-to-date basis. Also, just more generally, I guess you could say, inventory is so low and so weak, and that has to do with the fact that buyer activity is exceeding or outpacing seller activity, which of course brings us to our last point. Inventory. It's by far the biggest factor holding back activity and frustrating buyers. let's talk rates, you guys. This is something that has been a remarkable shift. Not just since COVID hit, but this was on a downtrend since, I think it was late 2018, 2019, as we saw some other elements of the economy start to slow a little bit. So I'm seeing 2.8% as of October 15th. That is just remarkable. I don't think any economist could have, well, excluding COVID, I don't think any economist would have even expected us to be under 4%, even without COVID. You guys can kind of see when maybe we were starting to normalize here, and then we kind of know what happened since. So that's when rates, remember in late 2018, rates almost touched 5%. And we heard buyers say, oh my God, 5%? How will we pay Excel and Centerpoint? How will we eat? Well, 5% is a historically attractive interest rate, especially folks who remember the 80s when they got locked in at 18%, 17% interest. Those guys will be laughing at you if you say 5% is expensive. So look at the downtrend since we made that kind of high mark, high mark over the last 8 to 10 years. The trend since has been down. In fact, interest rates have come down over 55% since 06. And look at this, guys. Used to be about 6.75%. So heck, let's be generous. Let's even call it 6%. We'll scrub some off. 6%. Well, guess what? We're under 3. So that's a greater than 50% decline. Really, really remarkable. And don't forget, I want to add, this trend and this level can partly offset some of our affordability challenges. It can offset the role of rising prices, not entirely, but somewhat. So just think about this, you guys. Even though prices are much higher than they were in 06, right? Prices are higher, however, payments are lower. And the answer is, it's right here, right? Payments are lower even though prices are higher because rates have been incredibly supportive of the marketplace. All right, our friends over at MBA, the Mortgage Bankers Association, just taking a look at their purchase applications index. I like to point out, this did make a V-shaped recovery. Let me clarify. Mortgage purchase applications made a V-shaped recovery. This is also national. So this indicator made a V-shaped recovery. So it shouldn't be surprising that when we look at existing home sales on a seasonally adjusted annualized rate from NAR, we also see a nice V-shaped recovery on home sales, not on GDP or jobs or what have you, but this is just on home sales. So, I like to show this so that we think about, as we see some of the changes in a leading indicator like purchase applications, it's usually not long until we see a similar trend, a similar change in a lagging indicator, which might be sales. So purchase applications happen before a showing, right? Which happened before writing an offer, which happens before closing a deal. So again, we like to think about this life cycle of a listing idea. And I know some of you have seen this, so I'll just run through it briefly. So sellers, what's the chronological pathway? Sellers, it's new, then it's active, then it's under contract, then it closes. Buyers take a little bit of a different path, and I just think it's worth noting. Buyers always start, what do we all do before we do anything? We Google it, right? We Google it. So buyers always start with the Google search, and then they usually, view some of the listings and create some of that listing traffic. Then they get mortgage pre-approval process. Then they go through that pre-approval process. Then they go to showings. Then they write offers. Then I suppose I could even say it goes under contract, then closes. So all this is to say, if you want to see what's going to happen with, say prices, we'll look at demand, look at sales. If you want to know what's going to happen with sales, we'll look at under contracts. If you want to know what's going to happen with that, go to showings. If you want to know what's going to happen with that, go back to mortgages. So again, it's this kind of chronological order where if we want to kind of look at what's going to happen here, well, maybe we look at what's happening here or here or here. Speaking of which, Google Trends, an amazing tool. I could geek out on this for hours, and I have. and I intend to again. So Google Trends is just a tool that allows you to compare the popularity of various search terms. So we're looking at the interest over time, or the popularity of these three search terms. Let's just see what we can see. Get a mortgage. About as high as it's been since '04. Pretty encouraging number there. How about, sorry guys, I'm cut off here. This is real estate agent. Can definitely see this one surging as well. Maybe not quite to those levels back in the bubble in the good old days of maybe looks like '05. But how about buy a house? In red, easily surged to its highest levels. And let's see, is that June, July, August, September? So that was June. So if people are Googling buy a house in June, maybe they'll be writing offers in August, and maybe they'll be closing in September, October. Who knows? Obviously depends on contingencies and everything. But you know, I find this a pretty compelling way to kind of get a gauge of what people are thinking, and I find that a little bit magical. How about the term realtor? This is indexed, guys, so 100 is the highest level. That term is at 100. Wanted to throw in the term interest rates. Look at the spike we saw there. Pretty remarkable data right there too. Zillow, some of you are going to want to throw tomatoes at me for this. Looks like Zillow overtook the search term realtor at some point in 2011. Now, a lot of realtors are on Zillow. A lot of Zillow listings are also MLS listed with agent representation. So don't get too down about this. Besides, I don't always need to know the value of my home, but when I do, I consult with a walking, talking, warm-blooded real estate professional in my area instead of a computer algorithm which cannot possibly identify and isolate all the unique variables of my home for comparative purposes. It's that simple. You got to work in a few jokes, you guys. Thanks for playing along. So let's shift gears a little bit. We're going to do two parts. We're going to start with some of our kind of shorter-term daily and weekly trends. Then we're going to pivot into some of our monthly and our longer-term trends. So let's start with the sort of near-term trends. Near term, I'm going all the way back to January of 2019, which frankly feels like a lifetime ago. I've been using the term BC and CE, but not in the way that you guys might think. It's before COVID, after COVID. So BCE, you know, before the COVID era versus after COVID. So look, take a look at this one, guys. This is daily showings, but we've rolled it up into a weekly average just so we don't have all that volatility of the daily activity. So we've got this year in blue, last year in gray. You guys can see the COVID impact. It's very, very clear, very evident. And then we kind of matched back up. We synced back up with last year's showing activity. And then we easily soared to all-time highs, and we've had no trouble staying elevated above last year's levels in terms of showings. Now, guys, didn't we just talk about that life cycle of a listing and the chronological order of the sales process, right? All this heightened showing activity should have indicated, and for some it did, that we could expect heightened contract activity, which then that means we could expect heightened closing activity. So this is the thing before the thing before the thing. It's a leading indicator. That's why I love showings. It's really a great leading indicator for demand. And sure enough, guys, well, I won't say when things got back to normal, but when some of the most strict kind of lockdown orders started to be revised a little bit, you know, we really started to see activity, showing activity surge. So let's take a look at activity, showing activity by price point. This is one that we've been tracking since April. Plain and simple, it shows us the share of overall showing activity. In gray is the most recent week of this year, and then in blue, same week last year. So for the most recent week last year, 30% of showing activity occurred on listings under 200,000, right? This year, for the most recent week this year, it's more like 21%. That's a pretty dramatic shift from 30% down to roughly 21%. We also see a decline in our next most affordable segment, up to 250. And then we see gains all the way up the price spectrum, right? Including million plus. So change in showing activity. We saw million plus up 78%, definitely leading the pack in terms of growth this year compared to last. And then, yeah, we really our only decline was in that 200,000. And remember, guys, just because showing activity was up doesn't mean that the share of showing activity grew. If other segments grew more quickly, as they did, they can command more of that share. So it's kind of a wonky mathematical thing. You know what? I'm sorry, I bored you guys with that. Just forget that. So that's change in showing activity. Let's take a look now at new listings. So we've got 2020 in black, and then we've got the prior three kind of historical years for comparison or benchmarking. Here again, we can see once COVID hit mid-March there, we can see seller activity really dropped notably. Then it came back, looks like it more or less got back to break even with where it was pre-COVID in the BC era. And then it kind of flatlined. You guys will notice it was behind the last 3 years for quite a while. It wasn't really until, looks like even maybe mid-August, when finally seller activity this year started leading the pack. Then we had the holiday break. And then again, looks like seller activity this year is finally still leading the pack like it was here. But you know, there was a long time where new listings were very much lagging the past 3 years. Well, that's sort of problematic because, as we mentioned at the onset here, demand has been relentless. Demand has been remarkably strong. Some would say shockingly strong, given the fact that we're in, what are we in again? Is it a pandemic? Maybe an important election cycle? I don't know. It seems like we're in a lot of stuff. So pending sales, you guys, easily surpassed the prior 3 years, and that happened really maybe beginning mid-June. And demand has had no problem staying well above those prior 3 years. So when we see seller activity, right, kind of just barely getting over those prior 3 years, and we see buyer activity has been, has surpassed those prior 3 years for some time, this is when we start to worry about inventory, because there's not that many new listings, and almost all of them are getting absorbed off the market by demand, by buyers. All right, let's take a look at year over year monthly change. This is September of this year compared to last. You can see the only 4 segments with gains in new listings for the month appear to be from, well, it's a pretty wide range, from 250 up to a million. But looks like our biggest gainer was, I guess, 350 to 5, followed by 5 to 750. So, I think it's worth noting, there's some first-time buyers in this segment. I know many first-time buyers want to be in this segment. But, 325, 350, 375, not impossible to get to for first-time buyers. Or someone who's selling a $250,000 home, maybe moving up to a 350. So this could also be a move-up segment as well. And remember, guys, don't forget about, I always like to remind us about some of the demographic activity and dynamics happening behind the scenes. So perhaps folks who would be buying in this segment, perhaps those are just business professionals, boring salaried professionals who are able to work from home, versus, maybe some folks here who are hunkering down or don't want to list or aren't able to move up because they had a job or income loss, lots of other factors there. This one's interesting as well because this segment has been doing pretty well. And, perhaps, I don't know, we'll have to look at what happens with some of the spec homes and what builders are doing in the luxury segment. But it looks like luxury new listings down 13%. But look at this, guys, pending sales, luxury pending sales over $1 million, up 75%. So pretty remarkable there. Here again, our $500,000 up to 3/4. nearly doubling, up 93%. Nice to see an increase in demand here, roughly 2 to 250, up 9%. However, listings in that segment, remember, were down 0.5%. So buyers are trying to push levels in this segment higher, but they're being met by the inventory wall. So let's just think about this, guys. We've now co-plotted pending sales and new listings. So we like to look at these together. And I'm noticing that demand is outpacing supply in every single price range over 200,000. All right, let's shift into part B. We're going to talk about some of our monthly and our somewhat longer term trends. So this is just plain old new listings for September. This is metro-wide, so whole Twin Cities region. And let's see what we can see. Like I said, we're finally starting to register some growth numbers here. I think August was, what do we see, 1.8, maybe 2%. And as of our report time, September was 10%, but then we reran the numbers and now it's more like 11.5%. As some of that activity was reported a little bit late. So up 11.5%, you know, we're still not where we were the last time demand was this high. But let's also remember that a lot of these bubble years was driven by excess supply, right? So we had an overbuilt market, an oversupplied market back here. Now we have an underbuilt and undersupplied market today. So September pending sales, up 28.5% to just shy of 6,500. Easily the highest figure for September, going back to 03, going back to at least 03 for certain. I believe at least back to 2000, possibly back to the late 90s. So guys, this could be a 2025 year high for September. I want to say again, it is important to note that some activity from June, July, and August will be postponed into September and October. However, you know, I think this accounts for more than that. I think, you know, interest rates are an incentivizing factor, a motivating factor. There's clearly some other dynamics going on. By the way, let me go back. I like to think of sometimes market dynamics. I like to think of push factors versus pull factors. So there's push factors around condos, right? Lots of common spaces, health concerns, you know, the lifestyle's challenged now because so many places are closed, whether you're a Twins or a Vikes fan, or you like the Guthrie or Pantages or Orpheum, or if you just like to grab a beer or a wine and a bite to eat somewhere in the North Loop or off Nicollet. You know, so much of that's been challenged now versus pull factors where, you know, hey, maybe some single family homes have a 4th bedroom or a second home office for the kiddos to do the learn from home thing, and you can do the work from home. So, you know, there are some push factors and pull factors, you know, and rates are one of those incentives pulling people into home ownership. It's kind of agnostic of what property type or price point, although obviously jumbo rates are very friendly now as well. And I think that's partly why we see such growth in luxury activity. All right, that was an aside. Sorry, I just like to geek out with you guys. So closing, so we saw pendings up 28%. Now we see closings up about 22%. So, you know, finally, some of this demand is starting to hit the closing table. Lenders have been busy, you guys. They've dealt with such a huge wave of refinance activity that they've really been swamped. Pending sales, this one is remarkable. So year to date, and actually guys, oh shoot, was it July or August? I know August for sure, can't remember July. It was by August, possibly by July, when we had already turned positive for the year. So year to date signed contracts this year are 7% ahead of where they were last year. Yes, during a pandemic and perhaps one of the most consequential election cycles of a generation or more. So let's take a look at CDOM, cumulative days on market, 15 days, about 2 weeks, 2 weeks and a day. That's the median, meaning half the homes take longer to sell. The other 50% of listings take less than 15 days to sell. Now guys, just because 15 days is our median, we know that there are some million plus, maybe even 2 or 3 million plus listings that have been hanging out, lingering on the market for 200, 300, 400 days. I think it was maybe 4 or 5 years ago now, we saw a listing that was on the market for 800 days. I don't think that's the case now. And also remember, even though the median is 15 days, that's not to say that, let's say, a $240,000 home in Richfield that's rehabbed and looks pretty good and shows well and is well presented. Those listings can go under contract in 4 hours. So some spend 4 hours, some spend about half spend more than 2 weeks, half spend less than 2 weeks. So just know that this is a median. We know there's activity way above and way below this. It's a far cry from 110 days. 90 is 3 months, 120 would be 4 months. So this is about 3.5, closer to 4 months. Pretty remarkable change. Yeah, list price, that one bores me. Let's keep going. So this is June median sales price. This one's a little more interesting. So here we see in June, prices were up about 5%, 5.25%. How about August? Prices were up about 9.8, 10%. How about September? Prices are up 10.8, 11%, meaning we see some acceleration in the year-over-year change in median sales price, right? So we've been seeing some 9, 10, almost 11% growth here. We've seen a couple other waves of sort of elevated or heightened price growth. This was as we got out of that Great Recession here. This was the early phases of recession where we saw a lot of multiple offers. Rates were very friendly. Don't forget, there were some tax credits. I've pointed out some of that here. Look at what that tax credit did to prices. Without it, this trend would have probably looked a little bit more like this instead of like this. Anyway, we don't have to relive the past, do we? So, as we're getting into some of the more, mature or later phases of this recovery, it is interesting to see this increase. Clearly, as the song goes, there's something happening here. September percentage of original list price received. So this goes to answer that question. Mr. and Mrs. Agent, how much of my $350,000 asking price can I expect to receive? What's reasonable? I know I don't always get all of it, depending on price point and area and condition and whatnot. But overall, across the Twin Cities, 100.5%. So in other words, the typical seller is getting 100% and then 0.5% on top of that for good measure. Now, there's some sellers over $1 million that are getting 90, 94%. And there's some sellers, in the city, in St. Louis Park or Richfield, some of the hotter suburbs or hotter neighborhoods in the city, some of those guys are getting 105, 110%. So again, this is a market-wide average. We know we have activity above and activity below. However, it's pretty clear to see, I'll say it again, there's clearly something happening here. We see the growth kind of subside a little bit. We see decelerating growth. So still positive growth, but the rate of growth has decelerated. You got your foot on the gas on the highway. You're going 60. Well, I'll call it 70. You're going 70. You take your foot off the gas. Now you're going 60. Your speed hasn't, well, I guess your speed has decreased, but you're no longer accelerating. That doesn't mean you're going backwards. You're not in reverse, but your speed has decelerated. You still have positive growth. You're moving forward, but at a slower rate. So we see plus 1%, plus 0.6, plus 0.3, plus 0.1. It looked like these gains were starting to moderate, starting to kind of flatten out a little bit until something clearly happened. It wasn't that long, well, 10 years ago, again, that seems like 5 lifetimes ago, where sellers were yielding or accepting on average 90, 91% of their list price. Inventory, this is probably the most recognizable or the most, how shall I say, the most felt change in the market. Buyers are frustrated by this, you guys. There just aren't that many listings that show up that meet their search criteria. You guys are able to auto email them. So, this is really probably one of the most challenging parts of this sort of market. It's not just best of breed that are going off market in record times. It's some of the listings that have lingered on the market for some time, or some of the listings that have come on, you know, that need some work, that need some rehab, that could use some floor sanding and some carpet and a coat of paint. You know, some of those listings are starting to appear a little bit more attractive to folks because the pool is shrinking. Month supply, 1.8 months of supply. We already talked about over 6 months is thought of as a buyer's market. Under 5 months is widely considered to be a seller's market. So we've been in a seller's market since 2012. Varying degrees of a seller's market. Looks like in recent years it was a stronger seller's market, even more of a seller's market than in, say, 2012 to 2015. And then there's clearly something happening. So we have less than 2 months of supply now. That is a dramatically undersupplied market, especially based on demand. So I can't remember if I showed this last time. I like to show this one. I'll just be really brief. Some people, we still get questions about this. So what does a seller's market look like as defined by less than 5 months supply of inventory? Well, it looks like this, you guys. There's a whole lot of demand competing over a whole little supply. All these buyers are really amped up. They're all really excited. And there just aren't that many listings for sale. Contrast that with a buyer's market where you've got a lot of listings on the market, a lot of sellers, and they're all competing for a shrinking pool of buyers. And then finally, we have a balanced market where, you know, supply and demand are roughly, you know, are fairly well matched up. Let's hop into Minneapolis. I could just stare at this picture. It's so beautiful. Okay, so new listings in the city. Some of you will know that there was a pretty dramatic gain in new listings in Minneapolis. What some of you may not be as familiar with is that there was also an enormous gain in sales activity. So whenever I see media outlets reporting on the fact that new listings were up, you know, over 40%, they always leave out the fact that sales were also up over 40%. And they also leave out the fact that if we're comparing September to September, well, yeah, that looks like a pretty extreme slope to me, a pretty steep climb. However, if we compare what's likely, you know, and I can't say this with certainty, I would suspect this is likely the peak for new listings, right? We can see it kind of taper off a bit. I would expect October, I guess I would think October would be a little bit lower. So in other words, we're comparing the peak of the market now to a slowdown, to a slower fall month last year. We know that August and September of this year have behaved more like May and June, right? So summer market of this year really resembles spring market of last year, which is why I think it's important to kind of put on a different lens and compare new listings this September perhaps with new listings last May, because that's likely a more apples to apples picture. When we do that, we realize that we're only about 13% above, and the whole metro is what, 10% above last year. So, you know, I think if we put on that lens, we can kind of see a little bit of a different picture. So spring market of this year has become summer market of this year. Baseline activity matters, you guys. If here we're looking at this baseline, you know, even though it's the same month this year and last, it doesn't really feel like an apples to apples comparison. Guys, in my 10 years doing this, I've never advocated for anyone to compare a September to a May, the same way I'd never advocate for anyone to compare a December or a January to a June or July. It just doesn't make sense. Now, in Phoenix and Miami and San Diego and Houston and you know, LA and some other regions, maybe it does make sense because they don't have the seasonality that we have. We live in such a beautiful winter market, as we learned abruptly yesterday. And so we have the seasonality. So therefore, you have to compare, as you guys can see, May to May, December to December, or January to January. It's never meaningful to say, hey, look, activity increased from January to May, January to May, January to May, as it does every single year. So this year's different, as we know. So I thought that was a little bit interesting. Taking a little bit more of a macro lens, did COVID just accelerate a trend that may have already been in the works, right? The changes that we're seeing now kind of started back in 2017. So you guys can see 2017. So 16 into 17, we saw growth in new listings. 17 into 18, we saw growth. 18 into 19, we saw accelerated growth. And then 19 into 20, we also saw accelerated growth. So sometimes these market shifts, are first seen in cities and condos and in luxury markets. But I like to note that there can be mixed signals, as we're seeing now. For example, condos and luxury homes are kind of sending off different signals. And I find that fascinating, although sometimes for some a bit confusing as well. All right, guys, let's take a look. New listings, September, year over year. Your eyes will likely be drawn to this 47.8% increase in new listings in Minneapolis. We are benchmarking that against several other large cities across the metro, including St. Paul, where we had an 18% growth in seller activity versus 48%. St. Louis Park as well, pretty notable there, almost 30%, and Brooklyn Park as well, almost 30%. Let's look at the sales side. Wow, this sticks out to me as well. So sure, we had 47% more sellers list their homes. We had 41% more buyers write offers on those homes. Well, write offers on the active listings in that city, not necessarily on exactly what sellers listed. So that growth, easily outpaced the growth in the metro, easily outpaced the growth in St. Paul, although St. Paul really had a surge in signed contracts as well. So you guys, people still want to live in cities. I guess maybe there's been a shift. What I like to say is there's been higher churn, higher turnover. So we see more new listing activity, in the cities. We also see a lot more buyer activity in the cities. So we still hear anecdotally, depending on price point and neighborhood, we're still hearing that for every individual or family or household looking to leave the city, there may be 2, 3, or 4 looking to get in. And the data more or less supports that. Days on market, it's always funny, this exodus narrative. It's always kind of interesting. If everyone were leaving Minneapolis and no one wanted to get in, it would surprise me that homes were selling 22% faster, right? If everyone were leaving Minneapolis and no one wanted to get in, I would think that sellers would have to adjust their prices in order to lure in those buyers and make their listings appear more attractive. Wouldn't think prices would be rising 10%. If people weren't interested in moving into Minneapolis, it's hard to see sellers getting 1.3% more of their list price at the time of sale, right up to 100.4%. Let's keep going on this for just a bit. September new listings in Minneapolis. There's our figure. There's our 1,000. Take a look at this, you guys. That is the highest figure, right? 1014 versus 1021. That is the highest figure since 07. Okay, so seller activity highest since 07. How about pending sales? All right, 605. No, yeah, okay, so 605 highest since 04. So let me get this straight. Wait a second. You're telling me that Minneapolis new listings are at their highest level since 07, but sales in the city are at their highest level since 04? Get out of town. People are surprised to hear this. The good news is the facts are true, whether you like them or not. The facts are there, whether we believe in them or not. I feel like that applies to a lot of our nation at this moment in time. So percentage of original list price, guys. Here's our, and by the way, this is city proper. So there's our 100.4%, up 1.3. Interestingly, remember, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 slides ago, we actually saw the metro starting to flatten out. The city actually came down from 18 into 19, and then there's clearly something happening now. Another interesting one, current list price. So it was 100.5% of original, but once you're current, right, once you have that price adjustment, you're actually still getting 3/100ths of a percent, not 3/10, 3/100ths of a percentage over that current list price. All right, let's do some segmentation. And I do see Christine's points here, so I think we'll address some of that. If not, I'll address it directly. So median percent of original list price by prop type. So single family in blue, condos in red, townhomes in green. Single family and townhome properties have been stable at 100% of original list price for some time. Townhomes actually since looks like mid-2017. It's a really popular product type for aging baby boomers. And it's really been an underbuilt segment for quite some time. Condos, this is interesting, guys. So condo sellers actually started accepting a lesser share of their list price. And believe it or not, that began in August of 2019. So that's been a years-long trend, right? We've seen that trend over a year, and it looks like looks like that trend is still softening. Looks like that indicator, that metric is still softening a little bit. So people want to look at this and kind of take this in a vacuum and say, oh my God, well, COVID and or the unrest or, any other concerns, well, that's made condo sellers have to accept lesser prices. Well, actually, that trend has been in the works for about a year. So, it didn't quite fall from the sky, although COVID and other factors might have accelerated it. How about average? So that was median. How about average? These tell us different things, you guys. Same metric, but average with single family, condo, and townhouse. Look at single family here. We can really see those single family sellers getting much stronger offers. Townhome sellers as well, condo sellers not as much. Pending sales by construction type. We'll just do this one quickly, guys. New construction in blue, existing or resale properties in red. New construction's been on a tear. Some of you guys know that. Others work more in the cities and inner ring suburbs where you don't see a lot of new subdivisions or new construction, maybe minus teardowns. Mostly concentrated around 50th and France and Edina. So new construction sales up 53%, but still only to call it 620 versus 5,800 existing, right? Existing only up 26%. So growth in new construction is double that of growth in sales. Growth in existing, even though the existing market, that previously owned market, is a much, much, much larger market. Okay, so kind of sticking on this theme, September pendings, we're going to break this out still by single fam, condo, and townhome. I see 34% growth in single family. I see 2.5% decrease in condo sales. And then again, I see about a 17% increase in townhome. That was September. Let's look at August. Well, forget these, you guys. And remember, this is traditional foreclosure and short sale. This one's interesting. I noted a 20% increase in foreclosure pending sales from 59 to 71. So that's 12 more. It's not a lot on a numerical basis, especially since we have over 7,150 traditional sales. So I wanted to check that again in September. And sure enough, that didn't seem to be a trend, at least not an immediate trend. We used to have a saying, 1 month does not a trend make, young Skywalker. Anyway, so yeah, foreclosure sales now down 47% from 68 to about 36. This is one that we're going to keep watching, especially particularly as we see, any changes to some of the forbearance policies and forbearance periods. Looking at sales activity by price point, decrease in sales in our most affordable price point, under $250,000. No surprise there. There just isn't a lot of product. And then 44% increase, $250,000 up to $500,000, 82% $500,000 up to $1 million, and then up 66% if you're over $1 million. Let's just pause and talk about that $1 million+ market. I just want to spend 30 seconds on this. This is August, closed sales above $1 million. Nice 12.5% growth. well above bubble levels, not quite double, but well above '06 levels. How about September? Wow, 62%, from 80 to almost 130. That's a pretty remarkable figure. I have to imagine that jumbo rates are attracting or spurring more luxury activity. Let's hop into Minneapolis now in particular. So this is the luxury market in Minneapolis. I know some of you might work that market. So Minneapolis new listings over 1 million, down 36%. Minneapolis pending sales over 1 million, up 17%. All right, interesting. Those are moving in different directions. So let's just talk size. Size matters just for 1 second. August pendings by square footage, by size of home. 7% boost in smaller properties, 25% in 1,500 to 2,000, 30% in the next rung, and then 28% in the largest property, largest sized homes. So that was August. How about September? Now we see 13% for smaller, 30% for mid, 30% as you get bigger, and then we see 46% with the biggest product type over 2,500 square. So here there does seem to be a little bit of a shift toward larger properties, even though that had the strongest growth figure on a numerical basis, just on a numbers basis. This segment still had the most sales, the strongest sales activity, even though this had the strongest growth. Okay, a little bit of bedroom talk here before we say goodbye. We're looking at sales by bedroom. So let's talk bedrooms here. Sales on homes that are 1 bedroom large or fewer, down 7%. 2-bed homes up 10%. 3-bed homes up 20%. 4-bed homes up 28%. So yeah, there does seem to be a little bit of a skew toward larger properties there as well. Oh, sorry guys, I meant to mention that was August. Now same analysis, but for September. So here, plus 11 smaller, plus 8 for 2-bed, plus 27 for 3, and then plus 42% for our largest bedroom count, 4 beds or greater. All right, 2 more slides, I promise. So this is from Zillow, and forgive me, but they're looking at page views, listing page views on different types of property types or different types of zip codes, rural, suburban, and urban. So from 2019 to 2020, we had a little bit of an increase in rural page views. We had a tiny decrease in suburban page views, and we actually had a 0.2% increase in urban page views. And when it comes to the share of sales sold above list price, we really don't see a ton of difference between urban and suburban in yellow and blue, right? Kind of following the same trend. And then as we got into May, we saw, a decrease in the number of sales that sold above list price. And then we started to recover in July. So I just want to mention something that we feel is really important. This may seem like it's kind of out of left field, but it's really important to bring up. Guys, we're looking at home ownership rate by race. There's clearly a wide variety of dynamics here. So we have one of the highest home ownership rates in the country. We know that. We do really well in that regard. However, that access, opportunity, and ultimately that prosperity that comes with it, unfortunately, isn't shared widely across groups. So we have a lot of work to do here. So what this says is 75.7% of whites own their home in the metro versus 25.6% of our Black or African American community. So really some stark differences here. And no, these didn't fall from the sky, right? They can kind of be traced back to before the Fair Housing Act in the 60s. They can be traced back to educational gaps, income gaps, employment gaps, and also the legacy of government implemented systemic racism when it comes to our policies and racially restrictive covenants and deeds. So I just wanted to bring that up. I know we're in this moment where people are thinking a lot about this, so I did think it was important to kind of bring that up. Okay, so I see Hazel has a question, so let's just deal with that one first. Is the growth in Minneapolis listings more heavily weighted toward the condo market? Let's take a look. I'm really glad you asked. All right, let's take a look. So I am in InfoSparks. You know what, guys? By the way, just in case there's anyone new on the webinar today, or just if anyone needs a refresher, InfoSparks right here on the North Star page. Also right here. Also on any new listing page, you'll also see it. You'll see the link right here. Oh, what a beautiful photo of your listing. I've never seen that one before. Come on, people. So InfoSparks, let's go into Minneapolis. We are looking at new listings. Let's make sure we're on monthly versus rolling 12 month. I want to look at monthly. And you know what? I am going to go into bar charts. And now, instead of just selecting condos or selecting single family, I'm going to break things out. I want to see kind of everything. So in Minneapolis, in September of this year compared to last year, there was a 53% increase in single family listings, 37% for condos, 64% for townhomes. So actually, no, the growth in condo listings was the slowest growth. It looks like townhome sellers had the strongest growth, and then single family sellers in the middle. Obviously, single family is the highest number, even though it was only middle of the pack for growth. And then I see there's a follow-up. 2007 Minneapolis listings were weighted by condos because of overbuilding at the time. Absolutely true. So for that analysis, I'm going to switch back to my line chart. And of course, I got to go way further back. And let's do something similar here. So we're going to do single family condo townhouse. This is new listings. You know what? For this one, guys, I think it's okay to use the rolling 12 month because we're kind of looking at the trend. Let's eliminate single family. You know what? Let's eliminate townhouse. Look at condo new listings back in 06. 4,300 versus 2,000. So we're still about half that, which is a pretty notable change. If we just look at inventory, should show a pretty similar trend. 13, 14 years ago, we had 1,400 condo properties on the market. We now have 360. So call it 1,500 down to 300 would be a 80% decline. So really quite remarkable here. And as long as we're talking about this, guys, oh shoot, I know we're a couple minutes over. Just as long as we're talking about this, I really want to show you guys something. Let's see, so Minneapolis, month supply. Let's just go to the monthly. Wow, okay. This is showing us a pattern, a change here, a shift in the market. So Minneapolis, month supply by property type. Look at this, guys. Look at the change we've seen in condos and townhomes. Single family in blue, still at 2.2 months of supply, not a huge change. In fact, it's absolutely flat. Condo absorption rates have nearly doubled. Townhome absorption rates are up about half. So, look at red and green right there. It is pretty clear that something has changed. Really, think of it as, what is it called? A seismologist, seismographer, whatever registers the seismic shifts. Something's registering that there's a change happening here. The needles on the seismographer, the needles on the seismograph are sort of scattering. They're sort of moving quickly. So this is really a good way to spot some of those changes. And we can spot them pretty clearly here. And I'll just shut down two of them. And now we're kind of isolating condos. So with over 6 months of supply, within just a year, condos have gone from a pretty dramatically undersupplied market to what could be an oversupplied market, as evidenced by over 6 months of supply. It's the highest absorption rate since April of 2012. It's an 8-year high, a 9-year high. So clearly there's something to be read from this chart. And that is that the condo market is changing. And let's look at new listings. Condo new listings up 37%, condo sales down 17%, right guys? So that kind of explains it, right? Sales down 17%, new listings up 37%. So even though it's not a huge number, the growth versus the contraction, they're kind of moving in opposite directions. So because sales are down and new listings are up, that's going to push absorption rates higher. And theirs are nearly doubling, almost up 100%, from about 3 to about 6. So pretty interesting reading there. And really, it showcases the power of InfoSparks and the ability that we now have to kind of spot these changes. Oh Lord, how I wish we had some of these tools available to us back in 2004, 5, and 6, when we could have spotted some challenges or changes that might have been coming. All right, we're 6 minutes over. I could go on for hours, but I want to respect your time. So if there aren't any further questions, shall we close things out?
Yeah.
Before Ann hops back on, I just want to thank our sponsors again, Bell Bank Mortgage, North Star MLS, Royal Credit Union, and Supra. Without your support, we would struggle to provide all the value that we do. I want to thank all of you for attending this week's COVID market update. Really means a lot to us that you come and spend time with us and learn more about the market. And please do check back next month. We're going to do, we are continuing to do these. We are monitoring a lot of the same charts and data points to kind of track the change. But every week, every month, we introduce some new, tools and tips and tricks or different visuals, different data, just to kind of keep you and me on our toes here. So I want to say thank you so much again, and have a wonderful day, and stay safe on those roads. Thanks, everybody.